I was diagnosed with cancer and they still expected me to cook. So I quit being their maid and made sure they'd never find me again. My name is Clara Wells, at 65. I've spent most of my life being invisible. I wasn't always this way. Once I was a promising art student. My professor Diane Monroe used to say I had a rare sensitivity to light and shadow that can't be taught. I believed her. I believed in myself. Then I met James Wells. Tall, distinguished from a family with old money and older expectations, he courted me with poetry readings and museum visits. We married 6 months later, and my brushes began collecting dust almost immediately. "Of course you can paint," he'd say, with that particular smile that never quite reached his eyes. "But after dinner, when the house is in order." His tone was gentle but unyielding, like steel wrapped in velvet. 40 years later, I live in a sprawling suburban home with gleaming hardwood floors. I polish weekly, and crystal glasses I wash by hand. James, now 70, still prides himself on never having to lift a finger around the house. He reads Rilke in the evenings while I prepare tomorrow's meals. Our son Daniel is a financial analyst, precise and distant, just like his spreadsheets. His wife Leona is sharp-edged and territorial, constantly reminding everyone of her executive position while avoiding anything resembling domestic responsibility. Our daughter Anna works in marketing, her communications always sounding like commands rather than conversations. Her husband Mitchell is polite but passive, deferring to Anna in all family matters. Then there are my grandchildren, my secret joy. Zachary 8, with his serious questions about dinosaurs and space. And little Olivia 5, who loves when I teach her watercolors. I drive them to school, help with homework, bandage scraped knees, and tuck them in during sleepovers. All without acknowledgement. I am the standard issue grandmother, unpaid, uncomplaining, unauthorized to make decisions. Last Tuesday, during my annual checkup at City Hospital, Dr. Sharma closed my file and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Wells, the mammogram shows early-stage breast cancer. We caught it fairly early, but you'll need treatment surgery followed by radiation. You'll need rest-reduced stress, and someone to accompany you to treatments." I nodded, accepting the file folder and prescription bag she handed me. Walking out of the hospital, I felt strangely calm. I wasn't shocked by the cancer diagnosis. I was stunned by the thought that crossed my mind. Who in my family would even care? For 3 consecutive days, I placed the diagnostic report on the living room coffee table right next to the fruit bowl, where everyone sits each evening. No one asked, no one noticed. Not a single glance lingered on those papers with their bold red urgent stamp. During those 3 days, Leona complained about her morning yoga instructor and gossiped about the neighbor's housekeeper. Anna discussed her big advertising pitch and casually mentioned, "Mom, you're so lucky you don't have to do anything." Daniel only asked, "What's for dinner tonight?" James looked up from his poetry book and said, "Clara, don't let the watermelon over-ripen in the bowl. It ruins the aesthetic." I just smiled and continued chopping vegetables, outwardly serene. On the 4th day, I had a follow-up appointment, meaning I couldn't be home in time for dinner or pick up Zachary from school. I informed Daniel the night before, asking him to handle it. He nodded absently, eyes on his phone. Leaving the hospital that afternoon, I clutched my medical records, medication bag, and a grocery tote, squeezing onto a crowded city bus during rush hour. My chest felt tight, my left breast tender, but I gripped the handrail firmly. When the bus jolted around a corner, a young woman steadied my grocery bag with a kind smile. I nodded gratefully. Then my phone rang, the first call of the day. I answered, and Leona's voice blasted through the speaker. "Zachary is still sitting at school, crying his eyes out. Where the hell are you, Clara?" I stared down at the medical file trembling in my hand as the bus lurched forward. "I asked Daniel to pick him up this morning." I explained quickly into the phone. my voice barely audible above the bus noise. I had a doctor's appointment, I told him yesterday. Leona cut me off with a sharp laugh. We have dinner with clients tonight. We can't cancel for trivial matters like this. Trivial. My grandson crying alone at school. My cancer treatment. All trivial. The crowded bus swayed and I pressed my fingers against my temple, trying to suppress the headache building there. Dr. Sharma's voice echoed in my mind. You need to avoid psychological stress, Mrs. Wells. It can impact your recovery. I was about to call Daniel when my phone rang again. James. Zachary is still at school. His teacher had to stay late. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Where are you? Isn't this your responsibility? He has parents. I said quietly, conscious of other passengers around me. I can't do everything by myself. Don't start with that modern woman rebellion nonsense. James snapped. You're his grandmother. That's your role. I wanted to tell him about the cancer, about the pain shooting through my left side, about how scared I felt sitting alone in that sterile examination room, but I swallowed those words just as I'd been swallowing my truth for 40 years. Instead, I thought about my life's quiet sacrifices, the times I'd fainted in the kitchen from exhaustion, but still served dinner on time. The nights I cooked with a 102-degree fever because takeout doesn't agree with James's digestion. The days I cleaned up after family parties while they relaxed, not one thank you among them. I hung up. No angry words, no dramatic declaration. I just ended the call. When I finally reached home, Anna and Leona were sprawled on the sectional sofa eating fried chicken wings, eyes fixed on some reality show. Grease stained the throw pillows I'd hand-washed last week. Zachary and Olivia sat cross-legged on the carpet, hunched over their iPads, surrounded by snack wrappers. Someone had picked up Zachary after all, but nobody mentioned it. James and Daniel were on the back patio drinking beer, laughing about stock options as if nothing had happened. I walked past them all, not one head turned, not one pair of eyes lifted to acknowledge my existence. Making my way upstairs, I reached for our bedroom doorknob and the door opened from within. Vivian Hartley stepped out wearing a silk robe, her auburn hair tousled, her lips painted red. She offered me a gentle smile as if we were old friends. I was just taking a little rest, she said, adjusting the robe's belt. The living room got so noisy. James said I should lie down here for some peace and quiet. My heart froze. Vivian, James's ex-girlfriend, the woman he'd pursued for years before settling for me. The one whose name he'd occasionally murmured in his sleep. She'd moved back to our neighborhood last year and had become a frequent visitor, but I never imagined she'd be in my bedroom. In my bed. My husband invited you into our marital bedroom. My voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Vivian lowered her eyes, suddenly fascinated by the carpet pattern. She didn't answer. From downstairs, James's voice carried clearly. Clara, don't make a scene about everything. We have a guest. A guest in my bed, while I was at a cancer appointment. In that moment, standing in my own hallway, medical file clutched against my chest, I felt something inside me, something that had been bending for 40 years, finally break. I stood frozen, unable to process the sight of Vivian Hartley emerging from my bedroom, the room where I'd spent 40 years making the bed, with hospital corners dusting the nightstands, and arranging James's reading materials just the way he liked them. She wore an ivory silk nightgown that caught the hallway light. Her carefully styled auburn curls slightly mussed her eyes, still heavy with sleep. This wasn't the appearance of a casual visitor who needed a moment's rest. This was the look of someone who'd made herself at home. Why are you here? And why are you in my bedroom? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Vivian shifted uncomfortably, forcing an awkward smile. I was just feeling a bit tired. It got noisy downstairs with everyone talking. James suggested I come up here for some quiet. That's when I realized the most devastating part: nobody had objected to this arrangement. Nobody found it shocking. Nobody except me, the one being pushed out of my own home. I walked back downstairs to the living room, looking around at my family as if seeing them for the first time. Anna lounged on the sofa, nibbling on chips, her eyes never leaving the television screen. Leona scrolled through her phone, occasionally chuckling at something on social media. Mitchell, Anna's husband, reclined in the armchair I'd reupholstered last spring. "Vivian looks right at home in our armchair, doesn't she?" he remarked casually. Daniel shrugged, not even bothering to look up. "It's just a bed, Mom. Don't be so sensitive." James sipped his wine, poured in the crystal glasses I hand-washed weekly, and said calmly, "Vivian is an old friend, Clara. Don't blow this out of proportion. You're always so overly sensitive." "What if I invited a man to lie in our bed while you were gone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No one answered. No one reacted. No one even seemed to register that I'd spoken. It was as if I'd become invisible, or worse, irrelevant. In that shattering moment, I understood my place in this family with perfect clarity. I was a faded shadow, useful only for cooking meals, cleaning messes, and shuttling children. Beyond those functions, I was nobody at all. I turned and climbed the stairs again, moving past Vivian without acknowledging her. Inside my bedroom. Our bedroom. I began quietly packing my belongings while the chatter and laughter continued downstairs. I didn't take much. Some clothes, my medication, my ID and bank cards, a few faded sketches from my art school days that I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet, things that were truly mine, not extensions of my service to the family. As I pulled my small suitcase down the hallway, little Zachary appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me with confused eyes. "Grandma, are you still picking me up from school tomorrow?" His voice was small, uncertain. I set down my suitcase and knelt to embrace him tightly, breathing in the scent of his hair, peanut butter, and that strawberry shampoo he loved. I couldn't answer him. I didn't dare. Over his shoulder, I could see into the living room. My cancer diagnosis report still lay untouched on the coffee table right next to the TV remote, and James's half-empty beer can. For 3 days, it had sat there in plain sight. For 3 days, not a single family member had noticed it, touched it, or asked about it. Beside it sat a stack of bills I'd organized for payment, next week's meal plan I'd carefully written out, and Olivia's school permission slip that needed signing. The physical manifestations of my invisible labor, the mundane machinery that kept their lives running smoothly, all ignored just as thoroughly as my cancer diagnosis. I released Zachary, gently smoothing his hair. "I love you." I whispered the only truth I could offer him in that moment. I picked up my suitcase again and walked toward the front door. No one called after me. No one asked where I was going. No one even noticed as I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The evening air felt different somehow, sharper, cleaner. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the house fall away from my shoulders for the first time in decades. The pain in my chest remained the physical reminder of the cancer growing inside me. But something else had lifted. Something I'd been carrying even longer than the disease. I walked down the driveway without looking back, the wheels of my small suitcase clattering against the concrete like a countdown clock running out. I left my home in the darkness. I didn't take much. Just a few outfits. My personal documents, the medication for cancer I hadn't told anyone about, and a folder of old, unfinished sketches from a lifetime ago. I hailed a taxi to the international airport, not knowing where I'd go, only that I couldn't return to what they called home. Standing before the departure board, I felt strangely calm watching flight destinations scroll by. No obligations, no expectations, no one to answer to. I chose Portland, Oregon, a place I'd only seen in travel videos about rose gardens. Something about those lush, vibrant flowers had stuck with me through the years. the kind of beauty I'd forgotten to notice. Before boarding, I sent one brief message to the family group chat. I'm going away for a while. Don't look for me. Then I powered off my phone, boarded the night flight, and watched the city lights fade beneath me. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty, as if I'd left not only my house, but also the shell of the person I'd become within those walls. When I landed in Portland, I realized how dependent I'd become. I didn't know how to use rideshare apps or book hotels online. The world had digitized while I was busy cooking dinners and folding laundry. I sat down on an airport bench wondering what to do next when a familiar voice called out, "Are you okay, ma'am?" I looked up to see Grace Mitchell, the young nurse who had helped me with my bags on the bus. She approached with a warm smile, recognition lighting her eyes. "I thought that was you. What a coincidence." Grace, it turned out, was a nursing intern at the hospital where I'd received my diagnosis. She was on the same flight heading home to visit family for the weekend. The universe works in strange ways sometimes. She helped me book a small hotel near downtown, showed me how to use rideshare apps, and even gave me tips on finding restaurants and navigating maps on my phone. Her kindness was so natural, so unassuming, nothing like the obligatory tolerance I'd grown accustomed to. The next evening, I made a dinner reservation by myself at an upscale restaurant, the kind James and Daniel often praised, but never thought to take me to. I ordered exactly what I wanted: a rare steak truffle risotto and a glass of expensive Cabernet. For dessert, I had creme brulee with fresh berries. As I sat there savoring each bite without rushing to serve others or clean up afterward, I realized something profound. For the first time in decades, I felt like the main character in my own life. I was no longer the grandmother saving money for the grandkids, or James's wife who doesn't like fancy food. I was simply Clara, a grown woman breathing, existing, and tasting life on my own terms. Walking back to my hotel, I passed an old art supply store with the unmistakable smell of oil paints and soft jazz playing inside. I stood outside, peering through the window at the rows of brushes, canvases, and colorful tubes of paint. I remembered how much I used to paint, how the world disappeared when I mixed colors on a palette, how Professor Monroe once said, I painted light in a way that made the ordinary extraordinary, before James, before becoming invisible. That night at the hotel, I slept deeply for the first time in months, not jerked awake by the blaring TV recriminations about forgotten errands or the cold silence from the other side of the bed. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. The notifications flooded in immediately. 47 missed calls from Daniel, 21, from James, 12, from Anna, 8, from Leona, and one from an unlisted number that caller ID revealed as Vivian Hartley. The text messages weren't concerned inquiries about my well-being. They were demands and complaints. From Daniel: Mom, Olivia keeps asking for your spaghetti. Nobody knows how to make it right. The housekeeper quit already. Zach wants to know why you're not picking him up anymore. From Anna: Mother, this is incredibly selfish. We have work commitments. Who's supposed to watch the children? From James: Clara, stop being childish. Come home. The house doesn't run without you. From Leona: The children are disrupting our schedule. This is extremely unprofessional of you, Clara. Not one message asked if I was safe. Not one wondered if I was hurt or in trouble. Not one said, I miss you, without following it with a household task I wasn't there to complete. I scrolled through dozens of similar messages, feeling oddly detached from their urgency, until one particular text from Daniel made me freeze. James has been hospitalized. Severe stomach pain. Can't find his medication. No one knows where you keep it. I looked down at my purse. James's prescription stomach medication was still there. I'd packed it reflexively after years of managing his medications, keeping track of dosages and ensuring refills were ordered on time. The small orange bottle sat beside my own cancer medications, a physical reminder of how automatically I'd prioritized his health over my own. Now what should I call? Send the prescription information, mail the pills. After 40 years of putting everyone else first, what did I owe them now? For the first time in my life, I gave myself permission to not answer immediately, to sit with the question, to consider what I wanted. I closed the messaging app and opened the hotel curtains instead. Letting the morning sunlight pour in, Portland's skyline greeted me fresh and unfamiliar, full of possibilities I'd never allowed myself to imagine. After leaving and turning off my phone, I was completely out of touch with my family for 3 days. 3 days of absolute silence. 3 days of following only my own rhythms. I wandered through Portland's famous rose gardens, letting the fragrance fill my lungs. I visited local farmers' markets, touching produce without calculating family meal plans. I sat on park benches watching children play without being responsible for any of them. I savored each morning without someone telling me what to do. When I finally turned my phone back on, a flood of messages poured in from Daniel. Mom, Dad's been hospitalized for his stomach pain. No one knows where his medication is. The doctor says his ulcer is flaring badly. From Leona, Zachary keeps asking why Grandma isn't picking him up anymore. From Anna, Mom, where are you? I don't have time to cook. And Olivia cried all night. From James, writing from his hospital bed, is this what you wanted, to watch everything fall apart? Is this your revenge? There was even a voice message from Zachary. Grandma, I'm hungry. Daddy and Mommy don't know how to make spaghetti like you do. Please come home. His little voice cracked on the last word, and I felt a twinge in my chest. Not guilt, but sadness for him. He was innocent in all this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I went to lunch in a tea garden by myself. Classical music played softly overhead as I savored a warm lemon tart with fresh cream. A dessert I'd always wanted to try properly, but never had the time to enjoy. I'd always eaten standing up at the kitchen counter or taken 2 quick bites before clearing everyone else's plates. Grace Mitchell, the young nurse who had become my unexpected guardian angel, called to check on me. She offered to walk with me around the park to help me relax after starting my cancer treatments. I agreed, finding her company soothing. As we strolled under maple trees, I told Grace about my past, how I'd studied art, how I'd dreamed of becoming a painter before my life was condensed into cleaning, cooking, picking up, soothing. Grace looked at me thoughtfully. If you used to paint, why not paint again? Not for anyone else, just for yourself. The next day, I purchased a small watercolor set and basic brushes at the art supply store I'd been eyeing. My hands trembled as I held a brush for the first time in 40 years. My heart raced, but I began. As I practiced each stroke, each blend of color, thoughts about the lost years flooded back. The birthdays spent cooking for others, the anniversaries when James forgot but expected a gift. The family vacations where I'd packed, planned, and cleaned while everyone else relaxed. But this time, I didn't cry. I let those memories flow onto the paper, transforming them into something new. After a few days, Grace taught me how to create a social media account and suggested I share my artistic journey. I chose the name Ink and Grace as a tribute to both art and her kindness. I posted my first images, a watercolor of the rose garden, an empty wooden bench by a pond, and a short caption. I once forgot who I was. Not anymore. The account slowly gained followers. Older women left emotional comments about rediscovering themselves. Younger people expressed surprise. This grandma can actually paint. I received my first email from a local arts organization inviting me to participate in a showcase for artists over 60. Me, an artist. The word felt foreign on my tongue after so many decades. Meanwhile, updates from home continued. They'd hired a housekeeper who quit after 3 days because she couldn't handle the pressure and expectations. Olivia was demanding to sleep with her real grandma and refusing to cooperate with the nanny. James had been discharged from the hospital, but no one knew what foods were suitable for his stomach condition. A message from Leona made me laugh bitterly. "We've hired 3 people, a housekeeper, a nanny, and a school pickup service. We still can't get dinner on the table on time." Their tone began to shift from demanding to sweet. "Mom, we never realized how important you are. We're sorry if we ever took you for granted. Mom, please come home, don't be angry anymore." But I wasn't angry. That was what they couldn't understand. I wasn't seeking revenge or trying to teach them a lesson. I simply had nothing left to give them. The well had run dry decades ago, and I'd been operating on fumes of obligation ever since. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, not out of spite or anger, but out of the simple realization that if I didn't, no one else ever would. Each morning, I'd walk to a different cafe order, something I'd never tried before, and sketch the people around me. Each afternoon, I'd attend my radiation treatment with Grace, sometimes meeting me afterward. Each evening, I'd sit in my hotel room and paint what I'd seen that day, posting the results on my growing account. One night, as I was cleaning my brushes, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the arts editor of a national magazine requesting an interview for their Women Reborn After 60 feature. The message ended with a question that made my hand pause, mid-rinse. "We'd like to know what inspired you to start again after everything. Would you be willing to share your story with our readers?" I stared at those words for a long time, water running over my fingers. What had inspired me? Was it the cancer diagnosis that no one noticed? The 40 years of invisibility, finding another woman in my bed? Or was it something deeper? Something that had been waiting all these years for me to finally listen. I decided to return to my city, not to go home, but to file for divorce from James. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, convenient for my morning radiation treatments, with afternoons free for painting. Every corner was arranged exactly as I wanted, each pillow, each vase chosen deliberately. The scents were mine: lavender in the bedroom, citrus in the kitchen, the faint smell of linseed oil and turpentine in the small alcove I'd converted into a studio. No compromises. I maintained contact only with Grace, ignoring all messages from my family. Let them learn to function without their invisible foundation. One morning, I opened my door to find James standing there clutching a bag of fruit apples and oranges arranged with mathematical precision. He looked gaunt, thinner than I remembered, with dark hollows beneath his eyes. "I'm not with Vivian anymore," he said without preamble. "She needed a different kind of man, not me." He paused, swallowing hard. "But I've realized the person I let slip away was you." I didn't answer. I simply turned around, walked inside, and closed the door. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there for 17 minutes before finally walking away. After that, James began appearing everywhere outside the community art studio, where I took classes, in the hospital waiting room before my treatments, at the coffee shop where I sketched in the afternoons. He rarely spoke, just sat where I could see him watching me with an expression I couldn't interpret. One day, I received a bank transfer notification, $200,000, with a message from James. "I sold the old house. This money is for your treatment." I immediately transferred it back. I didn't need his pity, and I certainly didn't need a belated attempt at atonement. 40 years of invisibility couldn't be purchased away. A few weeks later, Daniel appeared at my door with Olivia and Zachary. My son looked older somehow, with new lines around his mouth and eyes. "Mom," he said, one hand on each child's shoulder, "Dad misses you. I see now that I was wrong too. Could you come home just for a few days?" I remained silent. my hand gripping the doorframe. Olivia wrapped her small arms around my waist, her face pressed against my stomach. Nana, our house is so sad now. I don't like sleeping with the nanny. My heart softened just a fraction. I stroked her hair, but said nothing. Leona and Anna started texting again. Where is Vivian now? Please clarify, Mom. Stop throwing the family into chaos. I replied only once. Vivian was your father's choice. As for me, I choose myself. One evening, I happened to walk through the plaza near our old neighborhood and noticed a small stage had been set up. A community dance event was underway with couples swirling under string lights, and there in the center of the makeshift dance floor were James and Vivian, dancing a tango. Golden light illuminated them as they moved in perfect synchronization. Their eyes were locked on each other. Vivian wore a red dress that flowed like liquid fire around her legs. James wore a black suit I'd never seen before. They were beautiful together. I had to admit, turning, gliding, embracing. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. I stood at the edge of the gathering, silent, my hand clutching my purse strap so tightly my knuckles whitened. James executed a dramatic turn with Vivian, and that's when he saw me. His step faltered mid-spin. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. James with his arms still raised. Vivian looking confused. The music continuing while their dance stopped. Without a word to Vivian, James stepped away from her. He walked off the dance floor, cutting directly through the crowd, moving straight toward me with purpose in his stride. He stopped before me, close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne mingled with something new. Vivian's perfume, perhaps. He said nothing. I said nothing. But this time, my eyes didn't waver. I didn't look down as I had for 40 years. I didn't shrink. I didn't accommodate his presence by making myself smaller. I simply looked at him. Really? Looked at him, perhaps for the first time. I saw the silver threading through his hair. I saw the crease between his brows that deepened when he was uncertain. I saw the slightly crooked bottom tooth he'd always been self-conscious about. Most of all, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. James Wells was afraid. Clara. He finally said my name, sounding like a question. Behind him, Vivian had stepped off the dance floor. She stood watching us, the red dress making her look like a flame against the darkness. But she didn't approach. Something in our silent confrontation kept even her at bay. Are you well? James asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. I could have told him about the cancer treatments. I could have mentioned how the radiation made my skin burn and my throat raw. I could have shared that my prognosis was cautiously optimistic according to my oncologist. Instead, I simply said, I'm painting again. Those 3 words hung between us like a declaration of independence, not I miss you or I'm angry or even I'm sick. Just the simple statement of reclaiming what I'd given up for him. His expression changed, surprise, confusion, and something else I couldn't name. I've seen your work online, he admitted. It's remarkable. I hadn't known he was following my art account. The thought of James scrolling through my paintings, seeing parts of my soul I'd never shown him during our marriage, was oddly disorienting. Thank you. I said, not because I needed his approval, but because I was polite. Will you come home? He asked, and in that moment I understood what the unnamed emotion in his eyes had been: desperation. The music had shifted to something slower, more melancholy. Couples around us swayed gently under the lights. That's not my home anymore, James. I said the truth, simple and clean, between us. He stepped closer, his hand half raised as if to touch me, then dropping back to his side. Then I'll come to yours. He said, his voice lower. Whatever you need, however long it takes. After the dance encounter, James sought me out once more. He came to my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, his eyes hollow, devoid of the proud confidence that had defined him for decades. Vivian is gone, he said, standing in my doorway with slumped shoulders. She said I was always looking for someone else, and perhaps she was right. I didn't respond to his confession. I simply stepped aside to let him enter, but I didn't offer him water or open my heart. The gestures of hospitality that had been automatic for 40 years were now consciously withheld. James walked into my small apartment, his eyes moving across the space with undisguised curiosity. My paintings hung on every wall, watercolors of Portland gardens, abstract expressions of emotions I'd never been allowed to voice. Portraits of strangers whose stories I'd imagined. Soft light streamed through sheer curtains I'd chosen myself. Green plants thrived in corners. There was nothing extravagant about the place, but it radiated a warmth that felt almost tangible. "Clara," he said quietly, "this is truly a home." He swallowed hard. At our house now, nobody talks to anyone anymore. Because I'm not there. I finished for him, stating the obvious truth we both knew. He nodded, then launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. He wanted another chance. He wanted to make things right, to come back, to start over from the beginning. I let him finish before asking the only question that mattered. "Do you miss me, James? Or do you miss having someone to prepare your meals, fold your clothes, make your bed, and remind you to take your medication?" I didn't wait for his answer. I simply walked to the door and opened it, a clear invitation for him to leave. In the weeks that followed, they all came, a parade of family members suddenly discovering my value. Daniel knocked on my door with financial documents claiming he needed my signature, though we both knew he was perfectly capable of handling matters without me. Anna appeared with fresh-baked cookies that I knew she hadn't made. Herself, the bakery box was poorly hidden in her designer tote. My grandchildren were the most difficult to turn away. Zachary stood at my door with his backpack eyes hopeful. "Grandma, can you come play with me again?" Olivia hugged my legs tightly. "I miss your spaghetti, Nana." Daniel returned multiple times, increasingly desperate. "Mom, Dad is wasting away. The house isn't a home anymore." Through all of this, Grace Mitchell remained my constant support. She'd become the closest thing to family I had now, not by blood but by choice. She occasionally traveled to visit her parents, but always texted, "Are you okay? Call me if you need anything at all." One evening, while preparing dinner, I received a text from Leona that made my blood run cold. "Clara, be careful with Grace. She knows you have 3 properties and substantial savings. Who knows what she's really after?" I wasn't angry at the insinuation, I was horrified. They couldn't fathom a relationship not built on utility or gain. They couldn't understand that Grace cared for me because she saw me as a person, not as a function. The next day, my entire family showed up at the hospital during my radiation treatment. Grace was with me holding my treatment folder when we encountered them in the waiting room. Leona immediately bristled at Grace's presence. "Who are you to insert yourself into our family business? We're her relatives. You're nobody." Before I could respond, James exploded with a rage I'd rarely seen. He slapped Daniel hard across the face. Right there in the hospital waiting room. "If I didn't make it a rule never to hit women, I'd slap you instead." He snarled at Leona, "Get out and teach your wife some manners." The room fell silent. Patients and staff stared. My oncologist stepped forward looking concerned. I rose from my seat, put my arm protectively around Grace, and faced my family. "Grace is my goddaughter now," I said clearly, wanting everyone to hear. "And if I choose to leave everything to her, that's my right. Because she was there for me when my entire family couldn't see me anymore. Daniel, Anna, Leona, they all stood frozen, stunned by my declaration. No one spoke another word. James looked at Grace, then at me. Something like understanding finally dawning in his eyes. He nodded once, then turned and walked out. The others followed, silent and defeated. That evening, a final text came from Daniel. "If you choose to cut us off, don't expect us to call you Mom anymore." I stared at those words for a long moment, feeling not pain, but a strange sense of clarity. I smiled slightly, then permanently exited the family group chat. That night, as I prepared for bed, Grace called to check on me. "Are you okay after what happened today?" She asked, her voice gentle with concern. "I'm more than okay." I answered, surprising myself with how true it felt. For the first time, I've chosen my own family. They might come around eventually. Grace offered kindly, "Maybe, but it won't be because I bent myself into shapes to accommodate them anymore." After we hung up, I sat at my window looking out at the city lights. I thought about the family I'd lost or perhaps had never truly had. I thought about the word mother and how it had become more function than relationship. I thought about all the years I'd spent being needed but never seen. I picked up my brush and began to paint the night sky, each stroke a line being cut, each color a new beginning. I officially signed the divorce papers on a Thursday morning. We met at the attorney's office downtown, a sleek building I'd passed hundreds of times, but never entered. James wore his old Navy suit, the one he'd purchased for Daniel's college graduation 15 years ago. He looked gaunt, diminished somehow, and signed his name without saying a word. I divided our assets fairly. I kept the two properties my parents had left me: a small lake cabin and a downtown apartment I'd been renting out. I kept my personal savings account modest, but mine I asked for nothing more from James. I needed nothing from him. After the signing, I handed him a sealed envelope containing a single handwritten line: "I hope you find the peace I searched for all my life." He took it without meeting my eyes, and we parted in the lobby. 40 years of marriage concluded in a 20-minute appointment. Grace now legally. My goddaughter received a doctoral scholarship to medical school. I was her sponsor. The university called it a second-generation scholarship, assuming Grace was my biological relative. We never corrected them. When she signed the promissory note, which I hadn't required, tears streamed down her face. "I'll repay you," she insisted, with kindness of my own. I shook my head. "Pass it forward, not back." My Ink and Grace account exploded in popularity after an art blog shared my story: 67-year-old woman, reborn from decaying marriage and cancer diagnosis, emerges as artist. The headline was sensationalistic, but the exposure was real. Comments and messages poured in from women across the country, many my age, many sharing similar stories of invisibility. I was invited to hold my first solo exhibition, which I titled "Things That Never Had Names." Them. The gallery was one of the most respected in the state. Journalists came. A local TV station interviewed me. They called me a late blooming free spirit, which made me laugh. I hadn't bloomed late, I'd simply been kept in the dark. On opening night, my former art professor, Diane Monroe, now in her 80s, and using a walker, attended. She stood on the small stage during the introduction and declared in a clear, unwavering voice, "Clara, Wells is the most deserving student I have ever taught." James came too. He stood at the back of the room, silent, watching me. He didn't approach Daniel, and Anna appeared, bringing Zachary and Olivia with them. We hadn't spoken since that day at the hospital. Daniel approached cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. "Mom," he said, his voice subdued. "Zachary started taking art classes. He saw your paintings online. You're the first teacher they never knew they had." I just smiled, not speaking. No recriminations, no closeness either. Olivia tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Nana, your paintings are as pretty as you are." I bent down to hug her, and for the first time the contact didn't bring pain with the memories. After the exhibition, I began teaching small watercolor classes for middle-aged women, helping them rediscover themselves through art. My waiting list grew longer than I could accommodate. Grace and I traveled together during her breaks from medical school: Sedona, with its red rocks, Seattle with its misty harbors, Nova Scotia's dramatic coastlines, and Iceland's otherworldly landscapes I painted. While she photographed, we published a small coffee table book together, Second Chances, Light and Shadow. One evening in Iceland, as we watched the sunset from a black sand beach, Grace asked me, "If you could tell the Clara from 30 years ago something, what would you say?" I thought for a moment before answering, "Don't wait for cancer to come knocking before you start living authentically. It's never too late to begin again." A few months later, I received a package. A handwritten letter from James. Inside was a single page that read, "I always thought you were the fragile one. Turns out I was the one too afraid to live honestly. If there's another life after this one, I hope I have the courage to love you properly." It was signed simply James Wells. I didn't reply. I placed the letter in a wooden box with my unpublished sketches buried alongside the era when I lived solely for others. My cancer went into remission. The doctors called it remarkable progress. I knew it wasn't remarkable at all. It was what happens when a body finally gets permission to heal. Leona and Daniel divorced the following year. Anna and Mitchell moved to Colorado. James took up woodworking and eventually remarried a librarian named Dorothy, who shared his love of poetry. I received occasional updates about them all, not from direct contact, but through the small-town grapevine that never quite stops humming. I wished them well from a distance. Grace graduated with honors and specialized in oncology, working with women like me, those whose illnesses went unnoticed by families too busy to see them fading. Sometimes she brought her patients to my classes. Sometimes they became artists too. On my 70th birthday, I stood on the stone steps of my new studio, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of approaching rain. My palette and brushes rested in my hands, colors mixed and ready. Inside, Grace was brewing tea, the familiar domestic sounds now comforting rather than confining. I gazed toward the distant mountains where the sun was setting in a blaze of colors I would have once thought impossible to capture. Colors I now knew exactly how to paint. And I thought to myself, no one came to save me, but I saved myself. And that was the first time I truly lived. The second half of life I had discovered could be more vivid than the first, if only you claim it as your own.